This is Austin Real Estate Investing.
Austin Real Estate Investing.
We'll be discussing real estate investing in Austin, Texas, and bringing you experts from all different sectors of the real estate game. Your host, Jordan Moorhead, is a real estate agent and investor in Austin and is here to help you get started or to build your portfolio and explore new strategies.
Hi, this is Jordan Moorhead, and this is the Austin Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today we have Tim Stanton and Charles Vesley on with Creators Reclamation. They have a really awesome thing going here for co-living in Austin and helping people have just the greatest experience. And I'm going to let you tell them all about it. Hey, Charles. Hey, Tim. How are y'all?
Hey, we're doing great,
Jordan.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, y'all. So, Charles, let's start with you. Really important question that we like to ask everybody that gets on our podcast here. Why did you get started in real estate investing, and how are you involved with it right now?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jordan. And thank you so much again for having us on. It's honestly, I got the bug when I moved to Texas because you'll learn a little bit about myself and Tim. We both came from New York City, and let's just call it the barrier to entry in the real estate game is far greater than it is in Texas, specifically in Austin. So, I had my fair share of, pulling together and getting in on some, flips out in the East Coast. But where I really got the bug was coming to Austin. And I'll share maybe just a quick insight that really kind of set the long pole in the tent for our business, where I bought my first rental property here in Austin in 2019. And we lived in it for a year or so, and I spent a lot of time on the branding and the curation and really spending not only time, resources, but creative capital in making sure the space looked really compelling for the public. Mm-hmm. And when it was time to list it, we looked at comps. Agents told me, hey, this is your range in terms of the rent. And I actually can be transparent with the numbers because we've talked about this publicly, where a good range would have been somewhere around $2,500 to $2,800 for rent. And I had this gut feeling that customers will pay a premium or a higher dollar amount if the place is curated and branded and really intentional. So I went with my gut and I ignored the traditional comps and went towards that unconventional long-term furnished rental category and was able to rent it out 2 times over for $3,400 a month for a 1.5-year contract. So that was, let's just say, one story of many that kind of set the spark for our business.
That's awesome. And what about you, Tim? Can you explain a little bit about who you are and how you got started real estate investing?
Yeah, of course. I think I owe my mom a nod here, but she was a big Dave Ramsey listener a couple decades ago. And that mentality of if you live like no one else, you can live like no one else, that was just ingrained in me from being like a really young kid. And very quickly, I realized that what separates the haves and the have-nots in the world is generally people that own real estate. And coming from New York City, I've been around all the Wall Street people. I've been around the people that, have made the $1 million a year salaries and, all the big bonuses and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's about having equity. And I bought my first place when I was 25. I'm 37 now. And I was doing house hacking before house hacking was a category and before it was a thing. And I basically bought this place. I had a portfolio loan. And I think I put 3% down on the place. I had a 3-bed, 2-bath, downtown Denver, and I rented out 2 of the rooms and I covered all of my expenses. Shortly thereafter, I moved to New York City and I was renting that place out and ended up selling it and made my first little nest egg as the market went up in like 2012. And I would say the through line for my journey as a real estate investor is I've been able to stand on the shoulders of giants like every single time, and people that have brought me into a deal, people that know way more than I do. And it's really been about me surrounding myself with people that have way more skill set and understanding than I do. And that kind of dovetails into the community that Charles and I are building too. But we're so passionate to be, maybe a little bit further on in life in our mid to late 30s. And we really want to like pay it back to people that are maybe on the sidelines and just kind of getting started. But long story less long, I came from New York City. And when I lived there, I invested in some places in tertiary markets. Georgia was one of those in a small town called Milledgeville. But the first project I bought into after I sold that place in Denver was it was 14 townhouses, and we bought each townhouse for $60,000 a door. Wow. We maxed out the rent roll. We did, paint updates, maybe replaced the floor here and there. But we held it for 2 years, and we bought it for $60K a door. And then on average, we sold them for $90K a door. So that was my first kind of investing experience that wet my beak. And from there, honestly, it's just been me parlaying, deal after deal after deal. And as Charles alluded to, moving from New York City to Austin, I was just so encouraged because I saw Austin as it's the wild, wild west, and you can kind of do anything. And even from a regulation perspective, like in New York, I actually bought an apartment in New York City in Brooklyn Heights, and I renovated it. There was a co-op. You wouldn't imagine the hoops that you have to jump through with the city and how long it takes. And in Austin, in Texas in general, it's just such a breath of fresh air. There's so much opportunity. And, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's basically how we got here today.
No, I mean, and that's an awesome story, an awesome start. So I guess that leads me into my next question. What is so attractive about Austin for you all? So obviously, and Tim, especially you have the experience of investing in many different markets. Obviously, you're in Austin, and that's a no-brainer. You would invest somewhere close by, but you don't have to. So why do you choose to invest in Austin? And what, for both of you, what's exciting about Austin for you?
Hey guys, this is Jordan Moorhead here, and I wanted to ask if you could do a huge favor for me. If you could go leave a review for this podcast wherever you're listening to it, that would really help me get this into the hands of other people that are interested in information about Austin real estate investing, and I'd be able to help more people. Thanks, guys.
Charles, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. And I think there's not only in a weird way, if you've ever been to New York City, there's, hey, what makes New York City so great? And beyond the concrete jungle of it, there's an energy and a promise about tomorrow. As cliche it sounds, that's what makes New York City in many ways. And in a strange way, I feel the same way about Austin, where it feels as though it's uncharted territory. There's an opportunity to be pioneers in whatever category you're in. And what's exciting is there's a promise about where Austin's headed, not only as a city, but where the state is going to. And considering that's happening in the marketplace, we see that trickle down happening with growth in real estate. And we've even seen that with all the properties that we've held, the folks that have come to visit our tours, even some of the master classes we've held. In a similar vein, there's that energy in the room about, hey, we want to be part of real estate and we want to grow. And there's so many different creative ways to do that. And that energy is probably, it may not sound concrete. Of course, there are numbers to back the growth up in Austin, but I can bet on the growth and energy that I see and feel, not only in our network, but all the events that we host.
Absolutely.
And maybe to piggyback on that, there's a saying, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And Charles and I both know that by our own experience. But in coming to Austin, there's so much opportunity, and it's such a playground, because when you're in New York City, and honestly, I'm so grateful for that experience, because the barriers to entry are so high. You can't get in the game unless you're a multimillionaire. But then you come to Texas and you come to Austin, and not to say that, Austin's prices have gone up, but we're inundated with opportunities every day. Like my phone, I think I had 3 people hit me up yesterday about wholesale deals, like one of which was in Mueller for like it was like $250K for a 3-bed, 2-bath. And there's so many deals out there. And that doesn't happen in New York. Like New York, you got to know someone. You got to be on the inside, you got to be a part of that like upper class tier. And here it's like, you make the right connections, you network with the right people, like you can get in the game just as easy as anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. It's super welcoming place to come to. Yeah, a little bit off topic. What's your favorite restaurant in Austin? I know we're talking all about Austin. What's your favorite restaurant here?
Oh, I can take that one.
Go ahead.
Lauro, which is South Austin.
Yeah.
I probably go to this place once every 2 weeks. But for those that don't know, listening to the pod, Uchi, which is one of the most famous sushi places in Austin. Their food is incredible. And Franklin Barbecue. They basically had a baby, and the owners decided to launch this new concept. This is a barbecue Japanese fusion, and they have this chicken karaage and this brisket rice bowl that are so good. And honestly, they have the best happy hour in town. You can get a $5 drink, like a craft cocktail. You can get the chicken karaage for I think $7 an order. And honestly, for the value, staff is super nice. The ambiance there, honestly, I feel like, I don't know if that's Charles's answer too, but I feel like no one can hold a candle to them.
What about you, Charles?
Oh, man, that description makes me want to go to Lauro for dinner.
It's great. Yeah. No, I love Lauro.
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah, no, mine is a restaurant called Kanji. It's over on Kanje. It's on the east side of Austin, and it's a Caribbean spot. And man, I could close my eyes, just finger point to the menu, and anything is delicious. It's one of those spots for me. I've probably been there so many times that the waitress is like, "Oh, he's here again, guys.
Here he is.
Here he is." So yeah, that's my favorite.
How do you spell that? I've not been there.
Oh, it's so good. It's Canje. And if this helps, it made it in the top 50 restaurants in the country and out of all of Austin. So it's when that happened, the reservations got wiped, but I encourage you to keep looking and get a spot in.
I'll get in there. I'll put it on the list. So, I know we talked a lot about, how you got into real estate investing, some of the stuff you're all doing. Can we talk more about that? I know. So what's your portfolio look like today? What are your goals? What are you doing with the Creators Reclamation? How'd you get going with that, and where are you going?
Yeah, I can answer that. So, similar to what I was saying before, so much of my story is about standing on the shoulders of giants. But I have a friend in Austin, and he tapped me on the shoulder last year into my first deal in Austin, and it was a fix and flip. And that deal came to me, and I said, "All right, I'm quitting my job." It might have been a little bit of premature, but I just had so much vision for what that specific house could be. But once I got a taste, it just, and I don't know, Jordan, there's something about what these different things that I experience in my life, and I'm so drawn to transformation. I'm a big plant guy. I have a lot of cactus, but I think it's the day in and the day out of seeing the change and the transformation and the growth. And even to equate that to what Charles and I do is like cultivating in our men's group is like people taking ground and changing and growing in their life. And so, as I would kind of project that onto this house is a lot of people see something that's distressed and they can't see it for what it could be. And that something, for whatever reason, has always been like that sort of curiosity and that vision I just have such a passion for. So I kind of dove in head over heels on that specific property. And that was in North Austin. It was a 6-bedroom, 3-bath.
Wow.
We bought that place for $285,000. We put about $100,000 into it. And at this point, because I didn't have a job, we had to sell it. And I was like, I need the money. And we actually sold it to a friend. And the friend we actually go to church with. And he immediately started a co-living house, and he started house hacking. So he lived in one of the bedrooms and he rented all of the other rooms. He's getting like $900 a room. We did a really good job on the renovation, but he also paid us to furnish that house as well. So that was kind of like an aha moment for us. And honestly, we were just kind of kicking ourselves because we were the ones that we want to hold the property, and like I had mentioned before, what separates the haves and have-nots is not being in real estate, but it's the owning and holding of real estate. And so that was the light bulb for us. And last year was a really difficult year. We bought 4 different properties that were distressed that we breathed new life into and rehabbed, and we sold 2 of those. So the first one I alluded to was the number 1 house in all of Austin under $1 million in terms of value creation. So we created the value we created in that home was $269,000 from what we bought it to, or what we bought it from, to what we sold it at. And the other house we did, and this was only a 2-bed, 1-bath, but that house, the value creation of that was $184,000. So I would say we were super fortunate, but also the partners that we had on those deals really kind of like knew what they were doing and kept them on track. But for us, it was like, we don't want to sell them. We sold the number 1 and number 4 value created houses in Austin last year. But the light bulb moment for us was like, hey, we have this community of people and we have these houses with rooms. It's like, why don't we have these people in the community live in these houses? And that was the light bulb moment for us. And for Charles and I, like, things that we have come to know being in our mid-30s is like, hey, the people you hang around the most they determine the trajectory of your life. And it's like, show me your 5 friends, I'll show you where you'll be in 5 years. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And we really believe that your best future lies in your deepest relationships. So to be honest with you, it was kind of this intersection of real estate and then this community building that we're doing in Austin that, like, Charles and I looked at each other and we were like, hey, this is it. This is the thing. And so where we're at today, we're the 2 houses we sold. In addition to them, there are 2 houses that we're holding. And those houses are 2 of our co-living houses in Austin. So one of the houses we bought was actually a trap house. And we had people in there when we bought it shooting up drugs. There were probably 8 people in there day to day. And it was such an uphill battle. It's actually the one you see behind me on my screen. But we basically, I think we spent almost $250K on this house. And we're like, we're not selling it. We're going to have this co-living house. And so where we're at now is we're building our portfolio of these houses in Austin. And what we also are trying to do now is partner with investors to help them transform the property that they purchase into a co-living house, maybe instead of like a midterm or a short-term rental. As we all know, Airbnb revenues are down year over year by, I think, on average of 30% across metropolitan cities in the United States. And so we want to and are providing a turnkey solution to these investors to basically launch their own co-living properties. And Charles, I don't know if you want to add some more context in terms of how we do that.
Yeah, it's funny. We actually just held let's just call it a master class, where we invited folks all throughout the investment maturity levels, for folks that are just trying to get into it versus those that have, a few thousand properties in their portfolio. And one of the things we really highlighted in that masterclass was the investment that you put into the property from a creative, a curation standpoint has a direct correlation to your monthly and year-to-year ROI. And we've spent quite a bit of time, Tim and I, thinking about, well, how do we make that tangible for landlords? How can you make it palatable for landlords to say, hey, I don't really know anything about design. How can we make this place look curated and attractive and, most importantly, differentiated in the marketplace? So whether that's through home automation, through a session with us to help them think through, hey, you might want to, instead of doing a whole all gray home, you might want to consider these different types of color palettes and these different types of, mood boards and art direction. And that's been such a light bulb moment for us and been pretty attractive as we've been talking to more and more landlords.
So you're providing that as a service to landlords. So with home automation, can you there's so many different pieces of home automation. What specifically are you doing on these co-living houses?
Have you wanted to be part of GoBundance, the tribe of millionaires, but just haven't hit that millionaire status yet? Well, now you can, not even being a millionaire, by joining our new program, GoBundance Emerge. My name's Jamie Gruber, creator of GoBundance Emerge and member of the GoBundance community. And now you can join. GoBundance.com/emerge. GoBundance.com/emerge. Use code Jordan for $100 off this 12-week goal-setting program and mastermind that'll propel you to being a whole life millionaire.
Yeah, I can take that one, Charles. So when it comes to the home automation, I think as an investor, and even for us, alluding to that trap house example, we need cameras on our property, and we need to monitor the property in a really smart way. And so that's one of the ways. And from security to lighting, to controlling different devices in the house, we basically do all of it. And even the locks, like on the front door, like programming those remotely. And one of the things for me, like I've worked in technology for most of my career until I got into marketing, but one of the most frustrating things is this like home automation sprawl. It's like, hey, you use Arlo, you use this other app to control your lighting. And we've basically provided we've curated all of these different home automation products, even from like the motors that open up your blinds, literally all of it. But it works within a single pane of glass in Apple HomeKit that is all connected to Siri. And the great thing about what we provide is there's no subscriptions, and we curate all of the different hardware that goes in the house. We install the cameras, we install, maybe it's like the sound bar, the smart lighting, the smart thermostat. And honestly, that's a big one too for owners. It's like, hey, I don't want these people cranking the AC down to 58 when it's 120 degrees out. So having a smart thermostat where you can set that range, that if it goes out of range, it's always going to bounce back. So I've actually done a lot of strategic thinking about that, because what we say is like, hey, whether you're down the street or overseas, you can manage your property remotely within a single pane of glass.
Awesome. Did you have anything to add, Charles? Anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I'll just maybe, it's funny, like a lot of our business come from insights and light bulb moments. And interestingly enough, I'd say about a year and a half ago, I had actually done home automation in my own home, where just without any context of the business, I was like, hey, I want to be able to wake up in the morning and, the blinds and curtains should automatically go up. And then when the sun sets, I would love for all the lights in my home to automatically come up. And I would have friends come over to visit. I'm like, hey, what kind of magic wizard just happened in the background? And it's interestingly enough, a lot of people share in that. And if we can convert that experience into a service, not only for landlords, but for tenants, again, that's been an insight for us, because it has a positive uptick on the ROI.
Awesome. I know. So we've talked a lot about co-living in this episode, and I actually just was talking to Craig Kurlop, who wrote the house hacking book. And he talked about how co-living is going to be one of the most powerful strategies moving forward here when people are trying to find cash flow. What's the biggest mistake you've seen investors make with co-living properties? Because I know it's kind of an unknown right now for a lot of people.
I have a point of view on that, but I think it's really difficult for an investor to create a compelling experience. And something that Charles and I always talk about is like, how do you create a space that you walk into it and you feel something? And that's the thing, that if you don't have a trained eye and you don't have that expertise in design, it's going to fall flat. And the thing is, we're basically competing with hotels. We're competing with apartment complexes. Those teams have designers, they have marketing experts, they have all kinds of people, and even interior designers, but they curate these experiences to make people feel something. So I would say the biggest mistake that I see is people launch a co-living house and it feels like someone's just renting a room in a house that has no cohesive direction. And also the thing is, a lot of people that are co-living, what is the value you're delivering to your tenant? What's the value you're delivering to your client? And so Charles and I are really obsessed with user experience, and it probably comes from our tech background, but it's like, as a tenant, someone that lives there, what makes it feel like an experience? And that's something that we've worked really hard on, to make sure all of the houses that we bring to market feel community oriented. There are places for people to gather, whether that's coming around a fire, whether that's coming around some sort of experience in the kitchen, but it needs to be rooted in community. And there are other things too that we do as well to like enrich that experience. But Charles, I'll give you an opportunity to answer that as well if you want.
Yeah, I'll just add a small anecdote. It's without getting too maybe rooted in psychology, there is something to take away when individuals go to a coffee shop and they have their favorite coffee shop to work out of. And they bring their friends, like, hey, instead of coming to my apartment, let's go to our nearby coffee shop and, break bread or have a meeting. And in a similar way, that psychology kind of applies even to the homes that landlords are building. At the end of the day, you want to live in a space that feels intentional, it feels welcoming, and you want to invite other people to, whether it's to watch a movie, it's to have dinner. And we've been trying to lean into some of those behavioral insights that I think landlords can borrow from. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, I know you've both been in the real estate investing space for a little bit. If you had to start over today, what would you do differently? I know we've talked a lot about co-living. We've talked about designing great co-living spaces. Is there anything you would say? I mean, obviously everybody's going to start more efficient if they're going to start over. But if you had to start over today, if you're telling somebody that's starting today, what would you do differently?
For me, I would
more in 2019.
Bought more in 2019. That's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, I wish I wouldn't have sat on the sideline as long as I did. And I think there's this whole paralysis by analysis thing that we as investors, we can get cold feet. But I would say, especially that first deal, it's so scary. It just feels like your heart just sinks. And I would say it's, having the faith to step out and do the deal. Hey, crunch the numbers. It makes sense, and I think one of the things that I've learned is, hey, if you're connected to the right people, the right community, and you're surrounded with other people that are doing the same thing you are, you're going to be successful. So even though it's scary to get in that deal, it's like, shoot your shot, get in the game and get off the sidelines. And then everyone, just like through osmosis, like you're going to be okay. Like insulate yourself with really smart people that have gone further than you have in investing. And I think that's a really great fail-safe way to make sure you make it out on the other side.
Absolutely. Charles, other than buying more in 2019?
Yeah. No, it's I'll mean, just even I couldn't explain that better in terms of leaning in and taking a little bit of that risk, because that high risk leads to high reward. And it's funny, back in 2019 when I bought the first property in Austin, I thought I was making the worst financial decision ever, because you know that market. You remember that time when no one was buying. It felt like it was Armageddon in the world. And looking back, obviously it's probably one of the best financial decisions I made. And I think I use that to serve as a reminder that, hey, sometimes you got to get off the bleachers and jump in the game. And even if you lose, you learn something, and you can apply that to the next deal.
Yeah, I think it's so important. There's Michael Blanc. He runs a podcast of apartment investing, and he talks about the power of the first deal. And it's so hard to get into that first deal, but once you get into the first deal, all the subsequent deals become so much easier, and you're not going to get rich off one property. So if you can just get that first one, it's not important because you're going to make so much money off of it. And you could make a ton of money off it, but it's so important because it helps you start to build your portfolio where you will build real wealth and cash flow. And without that first deal happening, you're really in trouble. You're not going to get to your end goal if you don't take the first step.
That's so good. Yeah. And to color that in even further, Jordan, I think when I quit my job in February, I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I had an idea, but I would say, as a aside to kind of what I was saying before, I felt like I got a real life master's degree in 2023, like just being in the game. And as like Charles said, off the sidelines into the game. And I think you can only learn so much through reading books, catching up on Bigger Pockets forums, listening to podcasts, and those things are all great. And those have influenced me and spurred me forward in my career. But like you said, Jordan, it's jumping in the game. There's something that that real life experience can't be, you can't exchange that for, words in a book. And from there, it just kind of snowballs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said. You can only learn so much reading books and listening to podcasts. That's absolutely true. All of that becomes so much more real when you get in the game. And then I would even add that I think those podcasts and books become much more valuable when you have real life experience.
Yeah.
So, we've talked a lot about what you're doing with Creators Reclamation, co-living, what you've done in the past. What are the long-term goals for real estate investing for each of you?
Yeah, I would say for us as a co-living business, like where we sit today is we're looking to challenge traditional apartment living by fostering meaningful relationships and shared
Mhm.
homes. And something we haven't talked about, but it's like Charles and I are so passionate about taking the fight to this loneliness epidemic. And we really believe in that life is richer when you're a part of a greater community. And so for us, it's like, hey, how do we build this portfolio of homes? And there are a lot of hurdles that we have to clear, Jordan. And one of the big ones is there's this kind of mentality for young people. They don't want to live with other people. It's like
Mm.
if someone goes on a date with a girl and you say you have roommates, that's going to be looked at like as if you're lesser than you living alone and having your own place. And so there's a lot of education that we have to do, and we really want to communicate the benefits and the value of co-living. And so I think for us, there's these two paths, and it's like one of which we want to prepare these spaces and get them ready by helping investors just kind of like transform their place into a co-living ready property. But then it's also like building this demand side and breaking that mentality that, hey, having roommates is a bad thing. And for us, we want there to be so much value that is undeniable for people to come into those houses that we're going to build a waiting list. And I say that confidently, but we're going to have people lining up to live in these houses because the value of, what we say is your best future lies in your deepest relationships. And the people that you live with in your home is where you spend the majority of your time. So how are you being influenced in the place you play? Are you playing video games? Are you drinking all day? Like, are you actually taking steps forward to live purposely and like on purpose? And that's something that we're really focused on. Those two tracks is, how do we curate more houses? And then also how do we build the demand side and cultivate the community for it?
Jordan Moorhead here. Really quickly, wanted to tell you a couple other ways you can keep track of us. If you want to listen to all these podcasts and ask questions, the Moorhead team on YouTube is the best place to be. And then Austin Real Estate Investors on Meetup is a great place to keep track of all of our meetups we have going on.
Absolutely. And I think
I can't top that. That's well said, Tim.
Yeah, it's great. It's really well said. I think loneliness is one of the biggest problems we're going to face anymore. And it leads to so many other problems. So if you're lonely, you're more likely to have problems with depression, problems with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're not able to find that partner. Maybe you're not able to start a family. There's so many problems that stem from loneliness. And just hearing you talk about that, I had roommates. I obviously moved out of my parents' house. I lived on my own twice. And then I had roommates all after since that until I moved in with my girlfriend and we started buying house hacks. But it didn't occur to me, but it's so important to have that community in your home. Whether it's your family or your roommates, whatever it is, or your spouse, whatever it is for you, but living alone, so challenging. And people
Yeah,
don't
it's
talk
so
about that a lot.
detrimental. Yeah, and we, the US Surgeon General declared in May 2023 that loneliness and isolation are an epidemic in the United States. And this
Mhm.
is something that isn't really being dealt with in any strategic way by governments or even by like private entities. And the scary thing is coming from tech, it's like the more, AI products and the more immersive things that are developed, and now you have Apple Vision Pro, like
Ugh.
isolation is going to, it's going to keep growing. And so when I say we're taking the fight, it's like we really are doing that. Like we're going to get people off their butts, off their couch, and we're doing all these community events to actually provide value to people. And at the end of the day, that's what we're most passionate about is how do we have impact and how do we make a difference in our city? And even to what you said, Jordan, it's like we got to bring more awareness to this issue. And we also need to dispel this misnomer that you have to live by yourself in order for you to be accepted by society.
Well, I think you're going to be happier and you're going to be in a better spot financially if you don't live by yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, since COVID, I would imagine the loneliness has gotten much worse, especially with work from home and people isolating more. What are you doing? You talked about having events and spreading the word. What are you doing to get the word out there that they're living with roommates in these situations? It can be really great.
Yeah, I think, what I alluded to before is we have to add value.
Mhm.
And, coming from corporate culture, something Charles and I were talking about, I think 2 days ago, but a lot of these corporations, they spend a lot of money to bring people together and to do, donut Tuesdays and to have lunch and learn and these type of things to bring people together. But the problem is, and similarly with the mistakes that investors make in creating a co-living house, if you don't know how to build community, which is really a skill set. If you don't know how to build community the same way if you don't know how to design a house, it's going to be really difficult. And for us, there's this, and I actually worked for GQ magazine when I was in New York, which I forgot to mention. But there's so much culture in New York, in that level of excellence in everything from the restaurants to the brick and mortar stores. There's something that's so inspiring and magnetic about the design. And for us, everything that we do and touch, we want it to be different. We don't want to copy and paste what everybody else is doing. And I think a perfect example of that is in November, we had a pizza party, and Charles and I sat down. We were like, how do we have a pizza party and not call it a pizza party? And we landed on this event called Sauced. And so just like this huge headline, and you can actually see it on our website, creatorsatx.com/sauced. But we hosted this pizza party that was completely different. It was outside. We had tables with white tablecloths, candles, and it was this totally different experience. And people came there. We actually had a photo booth, and they showed up, and it was just different. Like the energy of that was different than, just showing up to like, hey, come grab a slice. And I think that sort of intrigue and that sort of like dynamic event is what we bring to the table, and how we're going to attract this certain type of person too, that is like really interested to grow, and they're captivated by design and interesting things. And there's just like a curiosity about them. And Charles and I know that when you have the culture, like if you have the tastemakers and the people that curate and develop culture in your city, you have everybody. And so for us, we want to make sure first and foremost that we attract those people. And the litmus test for me and Charles is like, hey, would I live in this house? Hey, would I go to that event? And if the answer is yes, we know that it's good enough. And we have a business partner that actually tries to talk us off the ledge, because sometimes we will stare at something and, our level of perfection and excellence is so high, and we'll keep it on the shelf for maybe a little bit too long. But that's just one example of kind of like what we're doing inside the community space. And Charles, I didn't know if you wanted to add to that at all.
Yeah, just something small. And yes, and there's so many ideas we're thinking about where we want to host master classes, folks that want to get into music and, curated DJ events. The list goes on. And we're just brainstorming on how to foster that culture. I just remembered something that in the master class that we held, maybe it was, I wouldn't say a week or two ago, the topic of the session was really to talk about how can landlords optimize and enrich their spaces. And actually Tim casually mentioned at the end of the presentation how this work is actually nested in our broader vision of co-living. And I remember the entire room just kind of lit up, and everyone actually raised their hands and talked about their own personal experiences, and how we kind of walked away realizing that it's almost in a weird way a quiet killer, because you don't hear about people sharing their loneliness, and a lot of folks deal with it. And sometimes people are a little shy to talk about, hey, I want to get into community, I want to find roommates. And that was another light bulb for us to say, hey, in combination with throwing events and opportunity for people to come together, it's actually quite prevalent, way more than we can even imagine.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of interest out there. And just the more you can get out there in front of people and show them that there's this way of living, and here's how you can do it, and here's how you can get into it, it's going to be so important for people to be in a better spot and be less lonely. Like we're talking about, loneliness is such a problem.
And Jordan, if I could maybe add one quick thing, for what Charles and I are building right now, we're trying to fight back against this consumeristic nature that we have in our culture. It's like, yeah, we could do this best event to try to get these people there, but the whole mission statement that we have for creators is for us to basically help people achieve their full God-given potential. And part of that, what we believe is that when we get, we give. And when we learn, we teach. And that's something that we want to instill in the people that come to our community. And one of the things that we do also is we give out these things called provision packs, where we go find our friends in the street and we give them a pack that has, some food, wet wipes, things like that to, just help brighten up their day and make it a little bit easier. But it's not about what we can get. And we want to pay that forward, and we want to really sow that message because, yeah, we want you to come here. We want you to find your tribe. We want you to get your feet under you. But once you do that and you are standing in a position of strength, we then want you to go and do the same thing. And we believe that if we can do that, it's going to be this exponential sort of growth. And that's kind of like the underlying message of what we're kind of casting out there to build this whole thing.
Awesome. No, that's really cool. I'm glad you added that. Do you all have a favorite book you like to recommend? Charles, Tim, both of you, favorite book you like to recommend? Maybe something around the space we've been talking about, co-living, being creative, paying it forward to other people, helping with loneliness.
Yes, I do. And honestly, this book, it's probably my favorite book I've ever read. And it's by this pastor. His name's Erwin McManus. And so much of the ethos of what we're building comes from that book. But there's this excerpt in the book, and he says, whatever you do, you need to find your tribe. If you're a zebra, find the zebras and run with them. If you're a gazelle, find the herd that runs at your pace. And if you're a lion, find your pride. He says, finding your tribe's not about being of the same color, same ethnicity, or same history. It's about being of one heart and mind. And he's the one, too, in that book that says your best future lies in your deepest relationships. And I think, even in my story coming to Austin, during the pandemic, I didn't know anyone. Community, I was so far from community. I didn't have a friend within the whole greater Austin area. And just, it's like, you got to put yourself out there. You got to find people. And that book just gave me so much hope. And now, like I said before, it's like, okay, I found my community and now I want to help everyone else find theirs.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a book called actually Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. It's a little bit on the fringes, but it's one of my favorite books because it's all about it's a little more business tailored and how we think about creating products and services for customers, but it's really focused on understanding human behavior. And it kind of breaks down certain examples and theories and principles on how do we come up with differentiated experiences for customers. And, one of the great quotes that I'm sure you're familiar with is, back in the day, if you were to ask folks that were riding carriages, what would you like? They would say a faster horse, right?
Horse, yeah.
And instead of, an individual or a pioneer coming in, well, hey, let me introduce you to a car, right? That is completely outside of their wheelhouse. And there's a ton of great principles and examples in that book that I constantly go back to when it comes to, hey, when you're in a rut and you're thinking about the same thing over and over again, and it feels, mundane and you're kind of stuck, I go to it to help me kind of get out of my box and think about creative ways to reach our customers.
Cool. So what's the best way for people to learn more about what y'all are up to? Do you have a website or social media handle we can direct people to?
We do, yeah. For the turnkey co-living business or furnishing business, you can go to reclamationatx.com. And for all of the greater community stuff that we're doing, you can go to creatorsatx.com.
Okay, so creatorsatx.com, reclamationatx.com. Do each of you have a personal social media handle people might be able to follow you at?
Yes, mine is at Tailored Tim. And, Charles and I are actually two guys that are off social media. I think coming from that tech world, we kind of like keep it at a distance, but I think we're at a point now is like we're trying to get out there a little bit more, and we're so passionate about this message that we're going to be a little more active. But Charles, I'll pass it to you to share.
Yeah, no, we have our Creators ATX account, and we tend to put a lot of content out there. But my personal is just my name. So it's Charles, Charles, and last name is Vesley, V as in volume, Esley. And it's interesting when we talk about social media accounts. A lot of times what happens is on social media, you tend to post things just maybe for your friends and social circle. But as we've been reflecting on this past year, we have this newfound focus on our business and some of the lessons that we've learned. So one of our goals this year is to share that expertise on social media, because we feel like now we have something that we can talk about that we feel as though the public will find valuable. So stay tuned, especially if you follow our accounts.
Absolutely. Well, I will make sure to give those a follow. Thank you so much for coming on here today, guys. I really appreciate it. Again, best places to learn about what Charles and Tim are up to are reclamationatx.com and creatorsatx.com. I think it's a super cool mission, and I can't wait to see what you get into.
Thanks so much, Jordan. Appreciate you having us.
Yeah, thank you. We'll talk soon, y'all.
Thank you.